Ah, there we go. All right, there's Jade. Good morning, Jade. Make sure she can hear. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Let's quickly run through the course overview. So we have gone through all of our face-to-face sessions. This is the last of our Zoom sessions. You have, according to the weekly schedule, you have one more discussion board due next week, and everything is due by the 9th of December. So you shouldn't have a lot left other than the reflection on this and the discussion board next week. What do you folks think about maybe doing a couple of Zooms next semester to kind of kick things off with your consultancy with Milestone 2? Want to try to do something like that fairly early in January? We'll be set and look at those. I don't want to take up our time today. I know y'all only schedule about 90 minutes for this. I think we should maybe look at milestones 2 and 3 early in January, and I also maybe by then you'll have some ideas individually when I can come out and visit and thank the organizations you're partnering with. I'd like to do that. I'd like to come out and just not take long with them, just, a 5-minute meet and greet kind of thing, and then sit down with you and see how things are progressing. I'd like to start making those visits fairly early next semester. As I told you I would, I want to make sure that we establish a good relationship between Gardner Webb and your organization. That's very important, or I feel it is. I'll actually put on a suit and look respectable, which is a big effort for me. But I would like to do that. So I know that you probably don't have your calendars handy, but I'll be emailing you some. Would you think a Saturday morning like this would be a good time? It shouldn't take us more than maybe 30 to 45 minutes to go over those milestones and remind us what our tasks are. I don't want to hit you with that right now. Want to do something like that on a Saturday morning, like we're doing here at 9 o'clock?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, works for me.
Okay. I'll send you some possible dates out, and we'll get by majority vote, we'll do a Saturday morning in later on in January. I'm thinking it'll be about the time that we start the semester, about mid-month, and we'll do a Saturday morning, and we'll sit down and talk about our milestones and where we need to go. You'll have a better idea then. I don't want it to be too early so that you don't have a notion of what you're going to be able to do. And then we'll start scheduling some visits maybe for later in January. As somebody who makes visits regularly through my other job, it's tough in January and February because of the weather. You never know. And so we need to get started on that fairly early. It's tough making visits in January, February, and early March. It always seems like there's bad weather when we got one scheduled, but we'll try our best to get those knocked out fairly early next semester and get you on the path where you need to be. All right, so I think we've covered everything on the syllabus. Whether I did it well or not is debatable, but we've covered everything, and we've done all the things that we set out to do this semester. We've done my trilogy on devotionals. We've done all the things that I wanted to do to prepare you to go out and do your consultancy, get started on it. So I feel good about that. We've all got places identified and things that we want to do. More importantly, the things that we want to do more than the places. You've all done well on all of your work. Let's look quickly. At what we've done this semester. We're all the way down at case study 4. Again, you've got discussion board due next weekend, and then if there's anything that you've missed and I can't think of anything, it'll all be due by the 14th. So I think we're in good shape. All right.
Dr. Lamb.
Yes.
Can I remind everyone to, if they have not completed the survey that was sent out by Dr. Hamilton, to please do. I think we've had about a 35% response rate on that. I believe it's due December the 4th for the summer laboratory experience.
Yes, we do need to remember that. Okay. The case of Jim. Yes, if you would fill out Dr. Hamilton's survey, that's a big help to us all. All right. The case of Jim, Vice President, International Nonprofit Association. Learning objectives to identify multiple clients in an individual coaching organizational intervention, to successfully conduct a contracting meeting with multiple clients to determine expectation, desire, effectively feedback coaching data to motivate desired action. All right. All right. So who's going to start us off today?
Doesn't matter. We can, or either one, doesn't matter.
All right. Brandon just. All right. Man, participant. Brandon Moore. Make him the host. All right. Brandon is now the host. He'll need to go in and claim that. All right. There we go. All right, here we go.
Ready to rock and roll.
All right, I'm going to start us off. Wait a minute, am I off mute? Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, well, I had myself on mute earlier. All right, so we're going to start with the facts of the case. So the company that, or the organization that is requesting consultancy is the National Association of Volunteers, which is the NAV. They help individuals and families who need to rebuild their lives. They are headquartered in Washington, D.C. They have a large amount of staff, large paid professional staff, and then, of course, they have thousands of volunteers. They recently underwent a restructuring and a new strategic plan. They have a lot of historic traditions and values that they had clung to for a very long time that really needed looking at and updating. So that was the purpose of the strategic plan. Okay. All right, so the people. We have Kathleen, who is the Senior President of Human Resources. She's been a volunteer, so has been part of the NAV for a long time, but was a new hire about 2 years ago when this reorganization happened. And they hired her for that that breath of fresh air. They really wanted somebody with compassion and passion to do something with the organization. And she really does believe strongly. Like I said, she's been a volunteer for a while, so she really believes strongly in the mission of the organization. And then we have Jim, who is the Vice President of the Legislative Affairs, and he's really been with the NAV for a long time, for 35 years, which is basically his entire career. He started there as a college intern. He wrote the first policy procedure manual, so he knows the ins and outs of the organization probably better than anybody. He likes to reminisce about the good old days and recall the heyday of the organization. So he's kind of stuck back into those in that historic time and those old values. He's been very resentful to the new changes. He wants to keep it the way it is, and that actually has put up a barrier between him and Brad, who is the CEO. That really ended their friendship when all this organizational structure took place. And he's not performing his newly assigned duties. He doesn't want to do it, and he hasn't been doing it. So that's why the coaching sessions started. Okay. All right, so then we have Jennifer, who is the consultant that was hired to coach Jim. She owns her own business. She left a corporate job to start her own company. And she was recommended by her aunt, who serves on the board of directors at the NAB, and suggested that Kathleen bring Jennifer in to help coach Jim. So that may be seen as a conflict of interest there, but we might talk about that a little bit later. And then we have Carlos, who's the new senior vice president. He is in between the CEO and Jim. So part of Jim's problem may be that he sees, he was not demoted, but put down in the rankings with that new organizational position. They have been trying to keep Carlos away from Jim just because of his reputation and his resistance to change. And he is being groomed to take the CEO position over in 2 years. So again, another reason probably why Jim is upset. You have Ava, who is the head of legal services. When Jennifer did her interviews, this is the one that told Jennifer about Jim's drinking problem and that actually he had a sexual harassment complaint. And nobody else told Jennifer that. Ava was the only one. So Jennifer didn't really get a lot of information up front that she probably should have. And then Brad, who is the current CEO, who's been there for 25 years. Like I said earlier, him and Jim were friends before the restructuring took place. He's trying not to have to fire Jim, even though he knows that Jim is not performing his duties. He's not performing up to par like he's supposed to be. But I think he's really trying to give him the benefit of the doubt just because of their friendship. Okay. Next slide. Okay.
So the assessment tool that was used was an interview, and there were 11 questions that related to Jim's performance. And Jim agreed with Kathleen in terms of who could be interviewed and asked the questions. And so the CEO was interviewed, 3 of Jim's employees and 3 colleagues, which were the directors of for legal affairs, housing services, and finance. Kathleen developed the original 10 questions. Jennifer did, and Kathleen reviewed them, and Kathleen added the 11th question, which is how effectively does Jim meet the deadline? The interviews revealed strengths as well as areas of improvement or concern that were revealed by the people that Jennifer interviewed. The results were shared with Jim 3 days prior to the second coaching session via email. And in the email, Jennifer gave Jim some specific instructions with the hope that she really wanted Jim to attend their second coaching session, and she really wanted him to be in a problem-solving frame of mind for their next meeting. So sharing the data with Jim actually backfired. He's now ready to leave NAB. He has asked Jennifer to turn the coaching sessions into a help me find a new job project. The request that their coaching sessions new initiative be kept secret, so he doesn't want NAV to know that he's actually looking for a new job. And Jennifer has agreed to do the opposite of the client's request, which she has agreed to help Jim in his pursuit to find a new job. And the first discussion question, who is the client? Originally is NAV. Then we have a secondary client of Jim when he asked Jennifer to help him find his new job. And what are the desired results for this coaching engagement? Originally, based on the contract with NAV, it's get Jim on board with the new strategic plan, have Jim implement the new strategies given by the CEO, have Jim meet expectations for his new role, and not have to fire Jim. Possibly if there needs to be a breaking of ties, that it would be that Jim resigns on his own. And then also the idea that if everything goes well with Jim and he accepts the challenges and will meet the new requirements of the organization, then they would like to institute coaching throughout the organization and kind of hold Jim up as hey, look, here's the employee that wasn't on board and wouldn't do anything we asked, but we've instituted this program of coaching and now he's on board. And then how effectively does Jennifer communicate understanding of the client's problem? She repeats to Kathleen for confirmation what Kathleen expects from her coaching of Jim. Kathleen affirms her statement. She suggests that this issue sounds like a performance improvement situation, but Kathleen insists on trying coaching. And Jennifer also provides Kathleen with a timeline of 6 sessions, reassessment to follow the 6th session, decision to terminate or renegotiate after the 6th session, and there is also some important information not given to Jennifer by Kathleen.
So the 4th question, how effective is the contracting meeting between Jennifer and Jim, and what items should be discussed and agreed upon? And we looked at it as there are 2 contracting meetings. So the location, first of all, of a familiar client-based restaurant of Jim's was not the best place to meet, as you might be conducting the improvement and coming up with procedures of how to enhance his performance. And there could be clients, and so that it might be interrupted. It's just not the ideal location to meet. The contracting meeting between Jennifer and Jim also appears to be one-sided and did not allow for elaboration of the goals. And it appeared to be that way in both meetings. Jim made the most of the suggestions and decisions of how they would move forward. And during the 2nd meeting, he kind of came out and laid out his plan for her to come and take and help him to get a new job by looking at his resume, and kind of agreed upon with the 2nd contract out of surprise that this is not what was intended. I think she felt obliged to have to agree to the new goal that he has proposed for a new contract to say. Jennifer now is in conflict of her original contract with NAV, as the new vision has put forth contradicts the original purpose of their coaching sessions that she had stated she would be doing with NAV. And Jennifer needs to inform Jim that in order for her to continue assisting in the manner he would like, she would have to end the contract with NAV. I think that kind of falls into an ethical decision, because now you have one client and their desires to keep him on staff, but now you also know that he's wanting to use their time and money to beef up his resume in order to find another job, leaving the company without that position. It goes down to your judgment and how you want to be viewed with your ethical decision making. Question 5, how effectively did Jennifer plan and conduct the data collection? What, if anything, could Jennifer have done differently during the data collection phase of the engagement? Jennifer's initial 10 questions were framed with an intent to garner responses that would provide in-depth feedback. That 11th question that came from Kathleen kind of came off as, is it a yes or no? Is he meeting those deadlines? I don't feel that it gave enough information to be able to analyze and interpret in order to help build the coaching aspect of their meetings. The data collection could have been presented to Jim in a face-to-face method and then given the assignment for the follow-up meeting. I think you should have done that face-to-face. Just emailing it, there's a lot of time for him to develop a lot of emotions without a clear direction of where he needs to go and what we're going to be going forth for the 3rd through 6th meetings that were initially planned. And prior to sending out the results of the data collection, a follow-up meeting should have been held with Kathleen. I think beforehand to discuss the information that she had received in regards to Jim's drinking situation, also the sexual misconduct, that allegations that may have been made against him. I think that because that goes back to one of the beginning directions that Kathleen was going with, instead of it being a coaching session. And then also, how does the board view, because he had the encounter with the board of directors, how did they feel about his last performance? Did anyone address those situations? Because then again, it goes into that performance review. And how did the client react to the data summary and feedback phase of the engagement? How effective was Jennifer's response, and what could she have done differently? He didn't respond in a positive manner. He kind of felt attacked, was not receptive to the idea of being coached, only saw the negative in the responses provided by colleagues and peers, and wants to use the company's resource to help him find his next job, which goes back to that ethical work ethic too of him in using the company's resources. Jennifer agrees to help him find another job. It should not be on Nav's dime or time, and Jim can hire her, but he would need to pay for that. Jennifer should have represented the data in person and in a more professional atmosphere. It could have been that she chose the place. If she was in town near her offices, she could have asked him to come meet her there, or in a neutral place. I think with having it at the restaurant that he was familiar with, it puts the ball in his court or his favor. And she gave him too much control over the coaching sessions. He led them in both sessions, 1 and 2. He dominated the conversation. I think the first one, it was about an hour or half an hour that he just kind of went on, and she didn't really get into the meat of what she wanted to do. And in the second one, she was just kind of blindsided by what he came in prepared for, looking for a new position at another company. And that's all we have.
All right. Questions? All right. Brandon, if you'll who's going to go next? We'll just shift the host. Brandon, just shift the host to whoever's going to go next.
Okay.
Excellent job, by the way. I'll reserve my comments until after the second presentation today.
I've got it on my desktop, Brandon, if you want to move to me.
All right. Make Lori the host then. Good.
I'm trying to remember how to share the hosting. I'm sorry.
Go to participants. And
I know. I'm in a different view.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so now let's see if I know what I'm doing. I need to, let me see, get to my desktop. Oh my.
Can do share screen.
I think this should be it. Can you guys see my screen?
No.
Oh, you can't?
No, you'll have to do on your, let's see. Lori is now the host, so you'll just need to do share screen.
Okay, share screen.
There,
Okay,
you
now?
go.
Okay,
There you go.
now you see it?
Yes. Yep. We're good
All right.
now.
Let me move my people here to the side. All right. Who's starting my group?
I am.
Okay.
Let's see. I need to move out of the way as well. All right, I think that's okay. Okay, the case of Jim. The facts of the case involving the people. We have Kathleen, who's the senior VP of HR. She's a recent hiree within the last 2 years with NAV. We also have Jim, of course, who's the VP of legislative affairs, who's been with the company for 35 years, started out as kind of an intern and has worked his way up through the company. Jennifer, who's the coach, has about 2 years of experience in OD. And Carlos, who's a senior VP, who's a recently hired with NAV. And then there's Brad, who's the CEO, who's been there 25 years with NAV. And again, him and Jim had a good relationship until Brad's recent promotion there. And then there's Ava, who's the director or head of services, legal services. Just a little bit about the place itself. Of course, it's NAV is a National Association of Volunteers. It's a nonprofit organization in human services, providing services to local communities. It's been in operation for about 35 years. Its national headquarters is located in Washington, D.C. It's a very large organization with paid professional staff and volunteers. They've had involvement with Congress, and some of the culture sessions actually occurred at Nick's place. Just a little background about the case itself. Per the phone call, the consultant thought it was a performance improvement situation and not a coaching goal. Jim, of course, is not on board with the new direction of the strategic plan. The senior VP of HR was responsible for contacting the consultant. Of course, Kathleen would like for Jim to accept the new strategic initiative and his role in the organizational restructure. And then Jim's supervisor, Carlos, was not involved in the process at all. Just some more background here. The company does not want Jim spending time with Carlos. Jim had his own agenda with the consultant. He thought the consultant would help him convince Jennifer and Brad they were making mistakes by hiring Carlos and taking the company in a new direction. And then the consultant was not told the full story. HR did not explain the entire story about Jim's, his situations, his drinking problem, his sexual harassment allegation as well.
Okay, so who is the client in this coaching engagement? Really, there are possibly three clients. Kathleen hired the consultant, so she is probably the most obvious client, but Kathleen's only been with the company for 2 years. I think Brad hired her to make some changes, to bring the company into a new direction. So really, Brad could be the identified client. He's the CEO. He wants the consultant to fix Jim, and you'll kind of find a theme throughout our presentation as the company going outside for someone to fix their internal problem of Jim. They just want him to be on board and do what they say. They don't know how to do that. They don't want to fire him. So Brad pulled in some other people, Kathleen, Carlos, so he could be ultimately the client. Then Jim inserts himself in the story as the client. So at the very end, when things aren't going his way, he decides to kind of take control of the whole thing from the beginning, that he can be the client and get the consultant to do what he wants her to do. The desired effects of the coaching engagement, really there are two goals. Kathleen, as a primary goal, Jim to be motivated to accept the new strategic initiatives of the company. He's walking around bad-mouthing the new initiatives. He's the historian. He knows all this stuff. These new people, the newbies don't know anything. We just need to get back to how things used to be. So the primary goal is for him to accept the new initiatives. This will involve him changing his attitude and his behaviors, ultimately increasing the performance. One of the things that the consultant said originally is this seems like it is a performance issue, not a coaching issue. So they think, oh, if his attitude is changed through coaching, then that will equate to him doing the job they want him to do. Kathleen has mentioned a secondary goal, which is she wants to send the message to the organization that coaching works. She wants coaching in this organization. So if it's effective with Jim, which it's not, then she's sending the message, oh, coaching works, and this is kind of what we're going to be about. Is this you, David?
I think so.
Okay.
So the question, how effectively does Jennifer communicate the understanding of the client's problems? She was able to find the root cause, but she never really addressed it. She didn't take control of the situation from either of the meetings that she had with Jim. But part of the problem also was that she didn't get all the information from Kathleen from HR, who had the awareness of the situations that were behind the scenes that weren't really explained, such as the drinking and the sexual harassment. So Kathleen didn't communicate everything. Then how effective is the contracting meeting between Jennifer and Jim, and what items should be discussed and agreed upon? She allowed Jim to determine Jim took the lead, and Jennifer did not take the lead in their consulting sessions. Jennifer realized that Jim was unhappy about the strategic direction of the company and felt that the contribution he was making was no longer valued in the business during the transition to new strategic initiatives. She was able to convince Jim to interview with that her interviewing process that really, that was the goal that he wanted in the end, was interviewing with external entities to find another job. But her process with him was really never effective. And they never really got to the point of discussing the issues. The issues were his performance and his attitude, and that never happened in either one of the conversations they had. So how effectively did Jennifer plan and conduct the data collection? And what, if anything, could Jennifer have done differently during the data collection phase of the engagement? Jennifer collected her data using questions. In the interviewing process, she interviewed 7 different employees. She had 10 questions. Kathleen added 1 question when she asked for additional feedback. Jennifer did develop a summary of the strengths and weaknesses of Jim as a conclusion out of that. But one thing of interest out of it that I felt was that she didn't involve Carlos, the direct supervisor, in any way, shape, or form out of this. It was the indication in our article of wanting to keep Jim away from Carlos, who has been tapped to be the future CEO. But it's difficult to think you go through a consulting process without involving the direct supervisor in any way, shape, or form and call it effective. How did the client react to the data summary and feedback phase of the engagement? That NAV was not provided the data summary. Jim was not pleased with the results of the data that he got. Before his second conversation with Kathleen, he was informed prior to the results to meeting with Jennifer of the data results. And that opened the whole can of worms of he no longer wanted to go in the direction of trying to be with the goals of trying to be a productive employee. Instead, he turned it completely to asking her to help him find a job elsewhere. So the results definitely from the consulting goals and objectives of changing his attitude and bettering his performance, that did not transpire. How effective was Jennifer's response? Jennifer told Jim that he would help him find a new job, and she was under contract to meet with him 5 more times to improve his productivity. But that response didn't benefit the client. In general, the one that's paying for the consultancy is NOV. I would call them the primary client, and certainly that decision is not benefiting NAV in the end. She didn't need to divulge all the feedback that she gave him on the front end, and that caused him to respond the way he did in their second meeting of asking for her to assist him finding a new job and on his resume and interviewing skills. What could she have done differently? Jennifer needed to get Jim to change his mindset and his focus first to become a better employee. She never spun anything in a positive light. She didn't set the tone. She didn't set the goals and the parameters up front. She let him, as the veteran employee of NAV, dictate what was going to happen, essentially, including where they were going to meet. Providing Jim that data in advance allowed him to change his mindset and set his goals and not focus on the goals of the consultancy that was taking place with Jennifer. I thought that Jennifer made a mistake that she had 6 sessions that were scheduled, and she should have set goals in advance and made small steps towards the outcome of trying to make him a productive employee once again, and she didn't do any of that.
Okay, we always like to look at these things that Dr. Lamb had on our first case study. So organizational mission, nonprofit human service. Organizational theory is new direction, new strategic initiatives. Organizational structure, large paid professional staff and thousands of volunteers. Organizational culture, dysfunctional, and I think up to this point, somewhat enabling Jim's behavior to continue, and then let's pull someone in from the outside to fix our problem. But they've allowed it to continue for a while. Organizational behavior, all focused on outside person fixing Jim. No one knows what to do. Organizational effectiveness, not effective in achieving new outcomes if Jim is not on board. So that's our summary. We've got some reflection here. The consultants should hold all meetings in a professional environment, not a restaurant and a bar. That's inappropriate. All significant players should be involved in the process. Carlos, who is Jim's direct supervisor, was uninvolved. Understand history of clients' past work relationships. Brad and Jim sharing the office, spending much time together. So the history, the beginning of Brad and Jim starting at the same time, being buddies, being in the same office, and now they don't spend time together, and Jim probably is feeling like he's being replaced by Carlos because Brad's now spending all the time with Carlos. Human resources responsibility to get help for clients when they display the need in the workplace, in the work environment. I think because Jim was drinking at work, that what is their responsibility to get him some help and some assistance? What's legal that they need to help with the mental health stuff? Sometimes getting the right people on the bus and in the right seats involves creative, out-of-the-box thinking. Now, I don't know, and maybe this will help me as we go along in this program. I guess the question I have is, do you put people in different positions if the organization changes, but they don't change with the organization? And maybe that's my indoctrination in my current work environment. We're changing, this person's not on board, it's hard to get him on board. So, creating a different position for him, such as a historian, and he's working specific on the things that he's good at, because he's good at some stuff. He's just not good in his current position as the strategic initiatives change. Bruce, you want to jump in?
Yeah, just the consultant, of course, never had control of the coaching sessions. Jim pretty much dominated both sessions. The consultant should not have released the feedback prematurely. Jim felt entitled since he was with the company 35 years. I think he saw the handwriting on the wall, and he saw that they was trying to push him out the door, but he's kind of in a protected group because of his age, of course, probably, I'll assume, being there 35 years. So termination was a challenge for them at that point. As Dr. Lamb stated, the number one priority of an organizationalist is to protect the organization, and the consultant did not have that philosophy.
That's it for us. Okay, how do I get the screen back?
All right, if you'll go in and make me the host.
Let me see if I know how to do that.
On the little dots where it has more from your main Zoom menu, you can go to participants. You can go to participants and then make me the host. It's got a little more button.
I don't
Out
see
to the right, you go to participants.
You might have to stop sharing first.
Okay. Do you see? I don't even see this. This is all I can see.
All right, just close that.
Okay. Do I close all of my tabs? I don't know. Okay.
There you go. Now, when you get to that menu, it has participants. When you get to the Zoom menu, you run your mouse up to the top or down to the bottom, and your Zoom menu will reappear, and there should be 7 participants. If you'll click on participants, and then go to our names, and there's a little more button there. You can make me the host.
Okay. I don't know why I can't get to any of that. I don't.
Lori, do your mouse at the very bottom of your screen and see if a little ribbon pops up.
No.
Nothing?
Nothing's popping up. At the top,
I had to go in there and do view options at the top or stop sharing.
Yeah,
do you see that at the top where it says you are viewing or view options and stop sharing?
None of that is on my screen.
At the very
top.
top.
You might need to close your PowerPoint.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, that was me. Let me see if I can reclaim host.
Yeah. I need a tutorial on Zoom, apparently. Oh, I've got stop share.
Yep.
Yes.
There you go. There you go. And I reclaimed the host, so we're good to go. All right, I can see everybody now. All right. Excellent job today. You hit all the points you need to hit. Yay. Now let me kind of put it all together for you here from my notes. What I think we need to understand. The actual goals, and thank you for going back to that list of things to look at here in these studies. The actual goal and objective of the organization was to get rid of Jim quietly, without lawsuits, without a buyout, and without negative publicity to the organization NAV. Let's just be honest. The whole reorganization was to get rid of him. That was the whole point. We've got a guy here that's a keg of dynamite. We got to handle it, and we've let him continue on a couple of years. The whole reason Carlos was brought on board was Jim was drinking and philandering, and they didn't know how to address that, so they brought somebody else in, thinking that Jim would get the hint and quit, and he didn't. He just became a bigger problem. And that your first clue was when they said they don't let Jim get anywhere around Carlos, even though he's his direct supervisor, as y'all pointed out. That tells you right now that they brought Carlos in to replace Jim, but don't want the bad from Jim to lap up on Carlos down the road, or now for down the road. So the actual objective of NAV was to get rid of Jim, but they didn't know how to do that. If you just fire him with all his legislative connections, he'll burn your house down. That's a bad thing. We got to have somebody else that forces him out or causes this to happen. We can't take this heat ourselves. We need a convenience, and how you know that is they submarined poor old Jennifer. Didn't tell her about the drinking and philandering and the real reason that she was there. They didn't tell her that part. She found that out after she took the job, and that should have been her first clue. They didn't bring me in to help this man. They bring me in to get rid of this man. So if that's the case, and sometimes that's your job, as you all pointed out correctly, we don't meet with him off campus. We meet with him right there. That's part of the embarrassment to make him quit. Is we're going to meet right here at work. We're going to meet in the conference room. Everybody can see us. We're not going to meet you privately somewhere, and we're definitely not going to get on board with your let's find another job for me. But in a larger sense as well, even if we weren't trying to get rid of Jim, which we are, we would meet with Jim at work, and we would show him the data from the surveys. That's not an appropriate thing to be emailed to anybody, even if you're not trying to get rid of them, especially if you're not trying to get rid of them. How would you feel if somebody emailed you the data that you know that even if you're not trying to get rid of them, that's a bad thing. Especially if you're not trying to get rid of them. But when you give them the data, at the same time, you give them your action plan for how you're going to address stuff. That's a very, very key for a consultant. At the same time that you give them the data, in order for you as the consultant to keep the direction of where this relationship and this activity is going to go, you need to, on one hand, say, here's the data, and on the other hand, here's how we're going to fix it. Otherwise, you lose control, as she did. He had time to make his plans, and next thing you know, he's run her up the flagpole. And now he's in control. But again, never email the data. That's a no-no. You know, we present data. We need to learn how to use media and communication effectively. One of the things that I often complain about is I get emails with way too much information in them, and maybe 6 or 8 questions that would have been better handled face-to-face or a phone call where we can communicate directly. Email is a wonderful thing, but in this case, don't email him the data. Meet with him face-to-face with the data, and also have an action plan that, you know, if you've got X number of bullets in your data, you should have X number of corresponding bullets in your action plan of how we're going to address these things. But it was unrealistic to think that Jim was ever going to get on board, because the whole reorganization was to get him off the bus, to get him out. This wasn't about changing seats on the bus. This was about, Jim, you no longer need to be on our bus. You are now a public relations nightmare and liability. We've got to get rid of you, but we can't do it in a way that makes, that blows up our organization to get rid of you. With all the things that you've been seeing lately, I mean, how timely is this one with all the things that we've been seeing lately, with all the things coming out about sexual harassment and misbehavior? Organizations are in a tough spot with these people. It only gets worse, and a lot of them want these people to go away quietly. I personally don't think that's the way they ought to handle it, but that's the way organizations want to handle these things many times. And so it's hard to get rid of people without the explosion getting you as well, and that's what they're trying to do in this case. But again, keeping Carlos away from Jim is key to the real, knowing that should have been the first clue of what the real objective was. To kind of recap, Jim's bad. They wanted to then they decided that they would circumvent Jim by hiring Carlos, keep Carlos away, go a new direction, and that Jim would understand that he was to leave. However, he didn't. He didn't leave even with the reorganization. And so they hired a coach to try to embarrass him, to get him to quit. I mean, the whole point of the coach was people to be seen and him to have to go through that there at the organization, and that would force him out. But she gave him that out, and he got control. So again, always meet at the workplace, face-to-face, present the data face-to-face, and have an action plan to go with the data. But she should have known immediately that they're trying to get rid of Jim. I'm not supposed to be here to try to make him feel better and to facilitate him. The company is who I'm working for. Their goal for me is to get rid of Jim. He's not going to comply. He hadn't in 2 years. He's figured out that they hired Carlos to move him out. He even said as much. Now he's decided on his own, I'll take this opportunity now that I see the handwriting on the wall. They've now hired somebody. I'll take this opportunity to find me another job. Basically, the hiring of the consultant finally got his attention, and forced action. He could have stayed there forever and just been obstinate. But then he realized the coach. But the coach can't. You ruin your reputation as a coach or a consultant by kind of doing this. Now, the organization will be happy when he's gone, but now it will trash your reputation as a consultant that you did things and basically ethically change clients and didn't work for the people who were paying you. But in a case like this, early on, you got to figure out why I'm really there. Being submarine, not being told, the whole deal is normal in consulting relationships. But you got to figure out what they really want, and they're not going to come out and tell you, but what they really want. But this one was fairly easy to figure out. They didn't want Jim. They didn't care. This was not about improving Jim. This was just about getting rid of Jim. Once you got that in your mind, then you understand I've got to take control. This is about, let's go formal. Here's the data, here's the action plan with deliverables and expectations. And if you don't meet these, it's an out kind of thing. That's what they expected her to do, because they didn't want to do it. But that was the expectation. So when we go back to what was the expectation from the organization of the consultant, to do what they refused to do, to take the hard line to Jim, that's exactly what they expect. And next thing you know, she's over here working with him. And now she's working for him. Their expectation is we don't really want to do this because we know it'll get all over us, the explosion. We don't want this to happen to us, so we're going to hire somebody to come in and do now we're going to tell them it's all about coaching, but the man's been there 35 years. He's not going to take coaching, especially in front of all of his colleagues. He's not going to take, and that was their whole plan, is that it would embarrass him to go ahead and do the right thing. But then she let him off the hook. I'll stay around and you can help me find another job. No, that wasn't what your role was. They didn't care about Jim. Or if they cared about Jim, then Carlos wouldn't have been kept away from him. Once you found out that he had done bad things and he was no longer tenable in the organization, you should have known then that you can't my point is you can't rehabilitate some things. As we used to say in an organization that I work for, sometimes there just has to be blood. Somebody has to go home. We can't, as an organization, stand for these things. That can't be that we allowed these things to happen on our watch and that it was okay. Those two things that Jim was doing, the drinking and the sexual misbehavior, you can't overcome those as an organization. Those are deal breakers. There is no rehabilitation from those. If he wasn't meeting deadlines or coming to work late or something like that, or not working well with his team, that's one thing. We can rehabilitate those behaviors. But drinking on the job and sexual harassment, oh no, you got to go. But they didn't want to do that, and I understand why they didn't want to do that, because the person that makes them go, that's not a good thing for them, and it's not a good thing professionally, and it's not a good thing personally. I had to let 200 people go at one time in an organization. 202 dudes. I had to let 200 people go. You don't sleep well when you let 200 people go. One person's enough, but think about 200 people. It doesn't work well. And you can call it whatever you want to. We called it the Renaissance. You can put a nice name on it. Whether it's one person or 200 people, you don't sleep easy at night. But that's your job. As in corporate world, that's part of what you have to do. Well, folks don't want to do that. Folks just don't want to do that because they're afraid they might scratch their car or be mad at them or do some of those things, or maybe take a shot at them, which I've had all three to happen to me. But that's your job. But one of the reasons why we hire consultants is to do the dirty work that we don't want to do. And you have to understand that up front, that if it was easy stuff, they'd do it themselves. If it wasn't politically dangerous and explosive and potentially life-threatening, they'd do it themselves. But they hired you to do the dirty work, and you need to know up front, or you need to figure out very quickly the real goal and objective of hiring you, and who you're working for and what the expectation is. And a lot they won't tell you. They're not just going to come out and tell you. But the whole purpose of hiring Jennifer in this one is that we want her to get rid of Jim, but we don't want it to be a situation where we can be sued or that he'll try to burn our house down or whatever. And so in the end, although she did it in the wrong way. In the end, she may eventually achieve the objective of the organization, which is to get Jim to move on. But she didn't do it in the right way. She did it in a way that's injurious to her career. The company will be happy that he's gone, but now they won't be happy with her behavior. And so that's not a good thing. All right. Comments on my comments. David, you got to say something.
Okay. Well, Dr. Lamb, let me add in there. I could have elaborated more on that. We talked about that when our team met this week earlier, and I elaborated that I felt like that was my sneaky suspicion as to what was really going on. And additionally, it does benefit them if he leaves on his own. I mean, it also financially, they don't have to pay unemployment and deal with the negativity of all that.
Yes.
So there's a financial benefit if he just walks away. But that was what I elaborated a little bit when we met with as a team this week on Thursday, when we were prepping for today. It's one of those where if you look at it, if there's not communication happening with the CEO on a readily happening basis, and you're not communicating with your supervisor, the lines of communication are completely broke. So what's the function of the employee within the organization?
Exactly. That's why I said the key to this one was when they said his direct supervisor, Carlos, did not have any contact or communication with him. They've already cut him out of the organization. Your job is to get rid of it. But as David just said, and I wrote this down, they don't want a lawsuit. They don't want to have to pay a buyout, and they want to avoid negative publicity, public relations.
Now, Dr. Lamb, we've just recently been hit with a age discrimination case, and we had a conversation in our administrative meeting last Monday. How do we quietly get rid of people? I mean, in this, we talked about performance evaluations, performance reviews. We really don't have a clean method other than allowing them to go through a contract. And of course, in the community college system, our contracts are renewed year to year. And then when we get to that June 30th date, not renew their contract. But that wasn't the case in this particular situation. She was actually terminated for not performing her job duties. Yeah. And now we have an age discrimination case.
Sure. There's some advantages to getting old. Few, but some. And that's one of them. You can always claim age discrimination. And see that's exactly what they're doing with Jim. They're trying to avoid that age discrimination lawsuit. And so they've all sat around, I'm sure, even board members, because didn't the board member was the one that contacted Jen to begin with? Even the board members, and they've all sat around as a leadership group and said, what in the hell are we going to do? This guy is a hand grenade. It's just going to be a matter of time before it goes off. What are we going to do? We can't let this become known publicly about his behaviors. These are things that are non-tenable, especially for a nonprofit that depends upon the largesse of donors. I'll be the first to tell you, I'm guilty. I've started giving all my money to St. Jude's. I refuse to give any money to United Way because of what went on in Charlotte with the behavior of the leadership in the United Way in Charlotte. Now, they used to get a lot of money from me, and I do mean a lot, because as a high school principal, I was responsible to raise a certain amount from the faculty every year, and then I had to make up the difference, but then I had to give a certain amount, was required by the school district that I worked for at that time. And so from me on a yearly basis, directly from me, they got at least $2,000, and they got at least $20,000 from my school every year. And they got that money, but then come to find out they were wasting that money, and they had bad behaviors. Some of these kinds of things that we're talking about today. And so now that's all supposedly been taken care of years ago, but I don't care. You're never getting another nickel from me. You misspent the money that I gave you all those years. And so I don't care what changes you've made. That doesn't make up for you allowed all that to go on for all those years. So I'm never giving them another nickel. that's kind of the way people are. Maybe I'm more vindictive than others, but I don't think so. I think that's in a situation where we're giving our money and expecting certain things to be done with it in return. You can't take the public relations hit. You can't keep Jim. But if you fire him, he's probably going to sue you for age discrimination, or you can't. He's going to burn your house down. So to Bruce's point, what do? You bring in a consultant and you embarrass him, and you force him to make a decision, and that's what they've done here. Now, that's all well and good unless you're the consultant that gets hired, but you need to know that that's what you're there for. But as David pointed out, your first clue should have been no communication with the upper echelon, his direct supervisor and the CEO. What does he do there other than sit around, drink, and misbehave and bitch? I mean, that's all he's got left to do. He's not in the loop anymore. Pardon my language. But that's pretty much all he's got left to do. They've cut him out of the organization. They've culled him from the herd, but he's still running along next to it, getting the check and being a potential public relations nightmare. You can't do that. You've got to figure out a way to make him go away, and that's what they're trying to do. I saw a situation in an organization that I consult with recently where they had a person, almost this exact same case. His behavior was becoming more and more untenable, more and more and more and more. They hired a private consultant to come in and collect data on him, do interviews about his bad behavior. They didn't do it in a survey. They did it in an individual private interviews, that kind of thing. And then got rid of him that way. It was almost exactly this case from the data. And once they showed him the data and what the action plan was going to be, or what their plan was going to be, they gave him the choice. We'll go through this process, or you can resign. And he resigned. Almost exactly the same behaviors, almost exactly the same position in the organization, time and all that. This one is eerily similar to one I just was involved in. I mean, within the last 6 months. And do you think for a minute the person that they hired a consultant to come in and do the interviews? They did this. You think for a minute she allowed him to take control of the situation? Absolutely not. She came in and did the interviews, and when they met with him, they already had all the dirt, they already had all the information, and they already had their plan together. And he made and he saw immediately, this is the only option I have. This one, obviously, this is an older case, but it couldn't have been any more clearer. And so that organization, did the right thing. But they understood from the beginning what the right thing was, what they wanted to happen. They wanted him to separate and be gone. And so that's the way that they did it. Might have been a little prompting on my part as to how to do that, but I didn't want to be the consultant, but we hired one, and that's exactly what they did, and it worked. Now, there's always that rumbling out in the community. There's always that rumbling within the organization. There's always that person, still trying to throw, but it's a lot harder to throw dirt on the organization from the outside and you did do something. And so when people come back at you you did take action. So Bruce, to your problem, that worked really well. It was exactly this kind of case, not just wasn't a performance issue. So when a performance issue, it's a little bit different. But again, a similar tack to this, where you bring the person in, you outline the deficiencies, you outline the plan before you do the termination. That's in public education. I refer to that quite privately as MTSS for teachers, where you do a multi-tiered support system that normally that we do for EC kids. You do that for teachers, where you start them with coaching, a one-on-one coach or a mentor, without judgment or value. For once you have a plan, you bring them in and you look at their deficiencies and you have a plan and you start that plan, but it's not an action plan that leads to dismissal. You give them, usually you give them about a quarter, which is 3 months, where you work with them on that plan with their mentor before it becomes an action plan. It's an improvement plan immediately. You put them on an improvement plan, and if that improvement plan, if they're not showing any improvement, it becomes, that same plan becomes your action plan. And this is for performance issues. This is not drinking and carousing issues. This is performance issues. You bring them in. You do a review of the performance that's not desired. The improvement plan is the desired performance. You give them a coach or a mentor for 3 months. If they do not improve, then you can go, that same improvement plan at that time becomes an action plan. And then 3 months later, you have the right to terminate that person or give them notice of termination 3 months later, because you have provided them 6 months of coaching and an improvement / action plan. And by North Carolina law at that time, you have cause and you can non-renew their contract. That's what we do, and that's how I teach it when I consult with people who want to get rid of non-performers or who want to improve non-performers. Now, but one of the things I have to ask them up front, do you want this person to improve or do you just want to get rid of them? What's your purpose here? What's your objective?
So do you think Kathleen added that question about deadlines because she wanted to bring in that performance?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly why that one was added. That was the purpose.
I think maybe the title of the case should be The Case of Jennifer instead of The Case of Jim.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the last one, and this one is more about her behavior and being, remember, she'd only done this for a couple of years, hadn't seen everything, hadn't done everything, maybe hadn't been burned like this before or didn't understand that what they tell you is not always what they want. Because they can't legally tell you, we want to fire this person and we don't want to pay a severance. They can't tell you that kind of stuff. You're supposed to be smart enough to figure that out. So this was the case of Jennifer, understanding what she was walking into and getting into and what the appropriate response on her part was going to be. I like the notion that, she added that performance question so that maybe she would have an out, to work on that, work toward an action plan, and if he didn't do that. But they didn't really want that. They wanted him embarrassed and get out quickly. But that would have been a good direction for her if he didn't do that. If he didn't take the bait, it would have been then a performance issue, and she could have gone that direction. So that was a good idea on her part. But she didn't. I don't think she saw the big picture. And as David pointed out, and as we've all pointed out, when he was cut out of the communication loop and was not even in the same room with his direct supervisor, he had no role there. They'd already made the decision. They just needed somebody else to carry it out, so it wouldn't get on them politically. Remember, what was Jim's title?
He was VP of
Legislative.
There you go. There you go. They wanted to get rid of him quietly without him burning the house down and hurting them politically, because he had, if you remember reading, he would say bad. He started saying bad things in the legislature. He started saying bad things about the company, about the organization. And that's what really, I think that was key in terms they finally said, all right, he has to go. His behavior's been bad. We've cut him out. He didn't take the hint and leave. We had to cut him out of the leadership loop because of his behavior, the drinking and sexual misbehavior. And now, we've limped along with him a couple years, but now he's using our tactics to cut him out and get him to quit have backfired on us. Instead of him quitting, he's now trashing us in the legislature. He's got to go. We don't want to be the one that pulls the trigger, because then he will badmouth us individually, and people that don't know him and his behavior will assume that there's something wrong with us. So we need to bring somebody in and get rid of him quickly. I don't think they actually would have gone through a long-term process of trying to improve him with Jennifer. I think they wanted him out now. And her job was to present the data, an action plan, and embarrass him to get him to quit, or be able to move to an action plan quickly, and her to get him out. That was her role, was to get him out. Hopefully he'll. I'm telling you, the organization I worked with, after the person came in and collected all the data, and again, she did it in person. She didn't do survey. She had people come in and she interviewed them individually and took notes, and that was very powerful. And when that person saw that data and saw what was going to be the plan of action that they were going to do for him, he made the decision that it's time for me to go, and he jumped immediately. And that's exactly what they wanted Jim to do. And Jennifer should have been smart enough to realize that some behaviors we can't live with that behavior. We can't rehabilitate this guy. Some things there has to be blood, and you have to look at what he's done. As soon as she found out that he'd been a philanderer or sexual deviant or whatever and a drinker, then we can't fix him. We can't afford the public relations nightmare if that becomes known. He's got to go. That's why I'm here. Duh. I should have figured this out quicker. But as soon as that should have been her first clue as to what her real mission was. He's been cut out of the loop, and now we find out why. Oh, they just want him gone. You definitely wouldn't meet with him at a place where he's drinking and outside of work. No. No. You bring him in and hope everybody can see him and run him up the flagpole. You try your best to embarrass him as much as possible. I told you I wasn't a nice person. I know how this works, unfortunately. And so that's what you do. You put the hammer on him immediately, because that's what the company expects, the organization that hired you. I do like the point that you made about the ethical concern. You got to, sometimes you have to do bad things, but you do them in an ethical manner. You operate with integrity and ethics. You do the right thing. I mean, I don't have any sympathy for somebody who's exhibited that behavior. I'm sorry. I just don't. Oh, can't you be compassionate? He has a family. No, these behaviors are not acceptable, period. We just can't accept some things. Again, it goes back to that foundation, the third of the trilogy. That foundation, build your house on the rock, in Christianity and the Word of Christ, and that some things are just untenable. I'm sorry. You got to have some values. Your house has to be built on stone. What you believe one's not going to change according to the situation. I do not like the term situational ethics. You either have them or you don't. If they're situational, then you don't have them. We can't have somebody who's behaved this way in our organization, period. Just can't. Got to go. That's who we are and what we are. I mean, what good can we do, and what name and what good can we do if we allow somebody like this to be in our organization? We cannot do that. It counteracts all the good that we do through the charitable work that we do if we keep somebody like this on the payroll. No. Even if nobody ever finds out, it's still wrong. But when they do find out, they'll burn our house down. No. So, this is one of those that we have to stand our ground and know what our values are and ethical concern and as a consultant. So Lori's exactly right. This is the case of Jen. This is not really about Jim. This is about Jen and her understanding and being a professional in terms of knowing what they really want and understanding that they're not going to always tell you what they want. You have to figure it out, and you better do it quickly. All right, what's next? Is that it for today? We finished 17 minutes early. Great day. All right. Looking at my calendar, I am looking at potentially the 13th, Saturday the 13th of January, or Saturday the 20th of January, for us to do a quick Saturday morning session to talk about milestones 2 and 3, and begin to talk about me coming and visiting at your place of where you're going to do your consultancy. So look at the 13th and the 20th, and I'll send an email out and get a vote on those. So I know that I've kind of caught you up cold this morning, but we'll do something like a 9 o'clock, or we could move it later in the day if that would be better for you, or if there's a different day. But look at those 2 dates. All right?
Okay.
All right, I will see you sometime in early January. You know where I am on campus there in Craig Hall. I've enjoyed it this semester. I appreciate y'all playing along. And everybody have a good holiday, and I'll see you after the break.
Bye.
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 Bye. Thank you.